Well, glory be to the Chad. I've made through all 12 days of the Texas whiskey experience here in this box provided by the Crowded Barrel Whiskey Company in Austin, Texas. So, all that's left is to say, which ones did I like best? Let's do this. Welcome to Whisky Riffs. If you're new here, I'm Kevin, and this is my wrap-up video for the 12 days of Texas whiskey from the Crowded Barrel Whiskey Company. And I appreciate this box because I've learned a lot about Texas whiskeys. If you have experience with this box or with any of the Texas whiskeys that I've experienced in this tasting, I would appreciate notes in the comments. So stick around to the end and I'll tell you which bottles that I'm thinking of buying a full bottle of. I'm not going to taste every one of these because some of them I really didn't love. I do want to try a couple of them again. So let me grab a glass. And let me grab some water because I really need to cleanse my palate between some of these really high ABV cask strength Texas whiskeys. Some of them are pretty spicy, pretty intense. Let's see. So Iron Root, I like Iron Root. I have tasted them before and I really wanted a lot more out of the glass than I was getting when I first tasted it. And for me, it was really just, my notes was just more spice than flavor. And I'm wondering if that was just on the day, or if I'm missing something, because I think Iron Root is a really good distillery. Yeah, maybe it was that day, because I'm getting, well, now there it goes. See, I was getting some sweeter notes and something in there, and then it just went to spice again. So for some reason, this one is just not doing it for me, and I don't think that I'm experiencing what I want to out of the Iron Root straight corn whiskey. So this is not going to be one of my favorites, and I really just need to not go back to this one again. I do like Iron Root though, and I think they have some great expressions. I've tasted some of their stuff at the whiskey shows. I've never owned a bottle from them, but if you have experience with Iron Root and you have expressions that you think I should taste, I'd love to hear about those in the comments. So the next one that I really liked, it's Milam and Green. So that was one of the ones that impressed me right off the bat. I really thought it had some potential. It's a straight bourbon whiskey, it had some nice flavors, and it responded well to water. So that was impressive to me and something that stood out for me as a good experience with whiskey. I like when you can play with the ABV a little bit and get more flavors out of it. Coming back to it, it's good, but I think I had some better ones along the way. So I may be a little bit partial to the ones later in the box. Again, I think some of the sweet notes are lost and there's a lot of wood spice and it seems really young, like aggressively young, like it made it 2 years enough to be a straight bourbon, but then we're done. There's no extra aging in here. So you're getting a lot of that spice and nice bite. If you like bite, that one definitely has some bite. But I wrote in my notes that I really enjoyed it and it took water well, but I'm not enjoying as much as I remember it. So the third day was Real Spirits, which I liked it, but again, I got more heat than flavor and there was a bit of a sour finish. So I'm not even going to go back to this one right now. There's only so much proof that I can take that's over 57% and make it through this whole video recording. But I think it had potential and I might try something else from that distillery. Just this bottle didn't do it for me. Next one was the Devil's River whiskey, which is a straight bourbon whiskey also. And that one, again, had a lot of potential up front, but the sour finish kind of turned me off. And I'm going to take just a little taste of this one because I think that maybe that sour finish is a lie, but I don't know if it's worth exploring too much more. I'm getting less of a sour finish than on my first taste, so maybe the Devil's River whiskey is worth exploring more. It's still probably not my favorite bourbon in this box. I do think it has potential. I think that I didn't get as much out of it that I expected with adding water though. So day 5 is interesting. So this is Treaty Oak Distilling straight bourbon whiskey. And when I first tasted this one, I noticed that it had some interesting rye notes to it, which I was curious whether this was a high rye bourbon. Now you can never tell which cask they gave the Crowder Barrel Whiskey Company. It may not be one of the ones that's on their website, or maybe different or exposed differently. But I said this was a high rye bourbon, and on their website they do produce 2 groups of Kentucky bourbon with a high rye mash bill. So that makes sense. And in nosing it again, yeah, there's rye notes there. And on the taste, there's definitely a lot of rye notes. So this is an interesting bourbon, but it also is high rye. And that's not one of my favorites. Now here's one that's interesting, because this is the Gulf Coast. This one's the Gulf Coast Distillers. And their rye was different than the other ryes. I couldn't find notes that I wanted to on their website about why this may be different, but it gave me some non-standard rye notes when I tasted it, and it was a bit funky. I like what it was giving me. There it is again. It's kind of that, I don't know, like an old wooden box. It's a little bit musty, but I find it fascinating that it's not the standard rye notes. They're not vegetal. There's some sweetness there and some musty notes. They're not bad musty notes. I mean, when you say musty, you kind of think, ooh, it's disgusting. But no, this isn't that bad. It's just different. So I wish they had more information on the website. It's really, really lame. I'd love to hear about it. If you know more about Gulf Coast Distillers, if you know why their straight rye whiskey may be a little different, I'd love to hear in the comments, because I'm really curious about why it's different. Because I kind of like it just because it is different. It's not great different. It's not like, well, man, I love this glass of whiskey, but it's a curiosity, you know? It's kind of making me want to try just a little bit more of it. But that was an interesting dram, so I appreciate that one. Okay, next up was a distillery that I really like. It's Balcones, and this is their straight malt whiskey, which I had a lot of expectations going into the tasting, and they just didn't pan out for me, which made me very sad, because I have a couple bottles of Balcones expressions here, and I do like them. I don't know why this sample bottle didn't come through for me. It's 111 proof, 55.55% ABV, so I thought it would have kind of closer notes to what I was getting in some of my bottles, but I was just seeing a lot of sour notes on the finish. And without adding any water, because that's kind of where I wanted to taste it, I'm still getting that sour finish. I love that distillery, and I really think they have a lot of great expressions, so definitely don't take this as the impression of what Balcones has to offer. This is just my experience with this one tasting bottle, and not their overall distillery. The next one up was Still Austin, which is a straight rye whiskey. And from my experience, it was a straight rye whiskey. There wasn't a lot extra to add about it. It smelled like a rye. It tasted like a rye. It finished like a rye. It's a rye whiskey. Not a bad whiskey. Just a rye whiskey that wasn't going to match anything in my list of, man, I need a bottle of that on my in my whiskey cabinet right now. Because I'm just not that big of a rye fan. So if you like rye, that may be just your cup of tea. After that, we had Ranger Creek Brewing and Distilling, which, I'm sorry, the brain does what the brain does. But the minute I read Brewing and Distilling, I started to see and sense beer notes before I could even taste the whiskey. So when I wrote my notes for this, it's like taste of beer for some reason. And, you know, it may not be real, but it was real enough to shut it down for me, and it wasn't one of the ones I go back to. Now, day 10, this was Andalusia. And Andalusia was definitely a whiskey that stood out for me. I really liked it when I tasted it. I'm going to go ahead and taste it again because I want to make sure I just wasn't having a good whiskey day, and it just did it for me on that day because, you know, we're affected by whiskey differently every time we taste it. And I really like the nose on this one. And this is a straight malt whiskey, so barley is big in my world. I really enjoy a lot of Scotch malt whiskeys, and this one kind of ticks off a lot of boxes for me. So I was really interested when I tasted this and caught some of those really familiar flavors. On the first nosing, I got some notes that were like, it's sweeter than I expected. There's malt notes there, but I really wasn't expecting this hit from an American single malt. So what did they do to it? Well, on their website, I noticed that they have triple distilled American single malt. And I love a pot still whiskey that's triple distilled. For me, it kind of gives that, even at a low ABV, a really nice selection of fruit flavors and different tastes and notes in there. And I think it can make a whiskey just that much better. That may be what this cask is. I don't know. They don't explicitly say that. They also have a version of this that was rum finished. Now, if this was rum finished, that would be really weird because the Crowder Barrel was given a cask from them. I doubt it was a rum cask, but this really seems like it was finished whiskey. So if this was just their single malt that's triple distilled, well done, guys. You know, even on this second go around with it, I'm really loving the nose. So many nice notes there. I just think that they have a damn fine whiskey in this even high proof version of it. All right, let's move on. We're almost done with the box. Day 11, TahWahKaro Distillery Company is the bottler for this one, and it is a straight bourbon whiskey. And my notes say that it was a lovely bourbon, and it got spicier with water. I enjoyed the first taste without adding water to it, and thought that adding water bumped up the spice. Let's see what it's like on this second tasting. Wow. So I'm getting leather notes, and I don't know if I got those the first time around, but probably. I think I had to get past those to get to the point of the cherry notes. And it's really spicy still, and I didn't add water yet. So I'm wondering if maybe I got lucky on that first taste and I broke through some of the different levels of spice and got some of the fruitier notes. But I was interested in this one at first. The second go round, maybe I'm not as impressed, but I still think if I have to pick a bourbon out of this case of 12 whiskeys, that I'm going to pick this one. This definitely has a lot of interesting notes to it. They've done a really good job of the typical bourbon notes, and maybe I'd like to try one of their bottles that isn't this high of proof and may have a little bit more of their own dialing in of the flavor notes. Okay, final whiskey on the list was the Lone Elm Whiskey, 5 Points Distilling. So this one was a tough one for me because I really wanted to like it more than I did. I said there was some sweet notes up front, then adding water caused a bloom of spice, which made it really hard to love the whiskey because I kind of wanted it down under its normal ABV that was bottled at this cask strength to see if it had another level, and I couldn't get past that bloom of alcohol burn because I like the nose right now. There's some sweetness there, there's some leather notes, I can get the cherry, I can get a little bit of vanilla, and I really do kind of like it. There was some sweetness there, but the burn just took over. They tried to add just a couple drops of water to maybe shift it, and it wasn't shifting in the right direction for me. I was just getting more of the alcohol burn and bloom. Yeah, I'm still getting that alcohol burn and bloom. So it makes it hard to do a valid review of this whiskey because it's really kind of consuming my tasting senses. I'm not getting where I want to be with it. I've tried cleansing my palate with water and then going back. I'm still not getting what I want out of it. So if you have any experience with Lone Elm Whiskey 5 Points Distillery, I'd love to hear your notes about it because I'm not seeing any reason to go to them and dig in and explore their expressions further. But it could be just a tasting box that the cask strength was not right for me. All right, well that does it. I've gone through 12 whiskeys in this box, gave my review of each one of them, and when it comes down to it, which one am I going to go back to and definitely buy a bottle? It's going to be the Andalusia Whiskey Company straight malt whiskey. There's so many notes here that I really like. There's so much about it that's kind of interesting to me, and you know, it kind of falls in that category of American single malt whiskeys that are making kind of a new impression on the whiskey industry, and I want those to really succeed because I think they have so much potential, and they're not kind of constrained yet by the restrictions of bourbon for being in new charred oak. So the bottle I'll buy is the Andalusia Whiskey Company, if I can grab one of their single malt whiskeys, and I think I'm going to have to try one of their tasting packs too, because I'm kind of interested in what their peated whiskey tastes like. So any thoughts you have on this 12 days of Texas whiskey, I'd love to hear those in the comments below. And until the next video, take care of yourself, take care of those people around you, and cheers. Yep. Favorite of box. Okay, final whiskey on the list. Okay.